All right, folks. We're going to get to, obviously, we're going to have a normal show on Tuesday, so ton to get to. Here's what we're going to do. A few Discord questions, and let's do a gem real quick. You want to knock your gem out, David? All right.
So, I've been thinking a lot over this week. I had a little bit of time, and I've been thinking about how transformative Bernie Sanders' movement has been about changing the conversation around healthcare, and how that's brought so many people into this movement. So that got me thinking, what is the next big kind of groundswell strategy that we need to take?
Yeah.
And I really think that we need to be articulating a politics about that addresses housing.
Yes.
Because we really are living through a housing crisis right now. Everybody across all different stratus, all different wealth levels in this country are really dealing with the one, when it comes to people who are renting, the unaffordability of renting. I was reading something that was very devastating in Texas Monthly today about how renting in Houston, Houston is not as attractive as a city to a lot of other people, but it's always been the argument. It's like, well, you can come to Houston, you can have big city opportunities and pay significantly less.
Right.
Well, this big Texas Monthly study came out and found that actually when you include like transportation costs, etc., it's only around like $80 cheaper than New York City. And there's probably some flaws with that study, but the general fact of it
is it ain't that inexpensive.
Sorry?
It's not that inexpensive.
Oh, it's not that inexpensive.
Right. I guess I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just saying like flaws accounted for.
Oh yeah, no, the flaws are just sort of like the way that they're calculating rent costs in New York City is probably a little bit funky because for most people they are spending 50 to 60% of their rent, and the way that they were calculating that seemed a little off to me. But anyways, the point is that even in cities like that all across the country, you talk to anybody, they can't afford to live. People who have put modest amounts of money into their households have been devastated over the past couple of decades, especially black families. I mean, like, we really need to understand that, like, for most black families, like the middle class black families, housing wealth was the majority of their wealth. And when that got evaporated in the financial crisis, remember, black families were foreclosed on way more as a percentage than white families. You saw lots of loss of wealth for families. So this is something that really unites people across different geographies, races, and even class. And it's becoming it's getting worse and worse. So there was an article out in the Wall Street Journal called Aiming at Wealthy Renters, Developers Build More Luxury Apartments Than They Have in Decades, which found that 80% of new buildings that are coming up are luxury apartments. And that's becoming the reality. So all of these cities, they're seeing the inner core becoming completely dominated by these luxury buildings that aren't meant for people on any kind of normal working class salary can afford. And they're just being held as investment properties for the super rich. We talked about Moms for Housing earlier and like what they're trying to do to raise awareness to the crisis in Oakland. And that's exactly the, kind of strategy that we can take. But, we also need to be coming up with macro political solutions to this crisis. And I just add two quick things before I start to get to the solutions. One is this goes back to one of the very classic Marxist concepts, is the difference between use value and exchange value. So use value is the value that an object, a commodity, or something like housing is to you. So what do you use it for? You use it to keep you, keep you safe, to house you, to live a life in, etc. That's the use value. That's where you get value from it. And then there's the exchange value, and that's its value on the market. So how much money you can get for it. What capitalism does is it distorts the relationship between use value and exchange value. Because exchange value, because you can own as much as you can own more than you could ever consume in capitalism. Exchange value becomes the most important metric for the super rich. And that's why you see all these people and all these corporations like Wedgwood, which is the company that owned the house that these women were evicted from in Oakland, are just buying up housing to hold as an investment, because over the past, since the 70s, we've made this huge movement. We've made this huge movement to push for property values to go up, because that was supposed to benefit, small homeowners, but it's really just benefited the super rich, and it's made most of these cities unlivable. And a second thing too that happens when you push up property values in this exponential way is it's really a tool of gentrification. Not always, but I'll tell you, in my home city of Austin, absolutely was something that was used to completely clear out neighborhoods. Yep. Yes, those people end up selling their properties and they get money for that. But what happens is that's It's a quick way to actually completely rezone a district, because you say, oh, this poor black neighborhood, we're just going to say that the value is worth more here, and then boom, those people can't afford the property taxes, and you've completely eradicated a neighborhood. Now you can build skyscrapers. It's just an unjust way to do city planning. So, what is there to be done? We talk a lot about things like, creating rent freezes. That's happening in Berlin right now. But they're having to fight against investors who are now creating essentially a capital strike. So landlords are refusing to do repairs. People are refusing to do further development or invest in the city. And the left government, the government that's in control of Berlin, is now going to have to face down like the capitalist class. I'm not saying whether or not they can win. Hopefully they can. But they won't be able to do that without having people prepared to fight against these corporations, because these corporations are going to hold out. They're going to make things difficult for people in the short term so that they can benefit in the long term. People need to be able to fight back against this. But, rent control is only one part of the solution. We really need to be taking control of the housing stock. So we can do that through building public housing. We can do that through taxing empty units, and then saying, the city or the state government or the community land trust is going to buy those units, and we're going to use those for public housing. Here's the fact. We need to take control socially of our housing stock, or else this is going to continue to get worse, because the private model has made more and more people homeless. It's made most working class Americans, middle class Americans, lose incredible amounts of money when you see the financialized nature of the housing model that we have in the United States at the current time. And it's creating a situation where housing is pretty much controlled by a few companies and the super rich. And that's not a model that's sustainable, and it's something that absolutely needs to change. So we need to really start pushing this housing issue as a complete socialist issue, in the same way that we pushed changing our healthcare system in the United States.
I agree.
And the fact that that's a conversation that, you can go into most people, and they've actually have had their perspective change dramatically in the past 4 years. We can start to do that with housing. It might seem a little outlandish and crazy now, but people all understand that this is not a sustainable model.
Absolutely.
There's this news story that came out in the past couple of weeks. Why Manhattan's skyscrapers are empty. Approximately half of the luxury condo units that have come onto the market in the past 5 years are still unsold, and those should just be seized. Like that should not be tolerated. And
Absolutely. Let me just read. We got 2 questions. We'll get to a bunch more stuff on Tuesday, but we'll leave for now.
Also, let people know we got a show for you tomorrow to recapping Michael's trip to interview Lula.
Yes, and that was you'll enjoy that. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.